Everything you've been taught about reality is wrong, because the architects of the system never wanted you to know how powerful you actually are. From the moment you took your first breath, you were born into a world of meticulously crafted illusions, not by accident but by calculated design. A world that subtly yet relentlessly trains you to believe in limitations, in death as a final punctuation mark, in the rigid confines of linear time, and in the acceptance of chaos devoid of inherent meaning. But hidden beneath the cacophony of modern life, buried under carefully constructed layers of distortion and denial, lies an ancient, vibrant current of truth that was never truly lost, merely strategically concealed. Thoth, the enigmatic and revered figure across Egyptian, Greek, and Hermetic traditions, didn't just leave behind a collection of myths. He bequeathed a comprehensive manual, a refined system, a profound blueprint for mastering the very fabric of reality. This sacred knowledge has been deliberately buried beneath the rubble of empire, misrepresented by aspects of academia, and diluted through spiritual half-truths. These are not empty, feel-good mantras or recycled snippets of Instagram wisdom. These are potent, tangible teachings, even dangerous ones in the wrong hands. The kind that don't just passively shift how you think. They actively transform who you are at your core. And once you perceive them, the veil lifts and the illusion shatters, rendering it impossible to revert to your previous state of unawareness. You were never intended to stumble upon this information so easily. That is precisely why no one ever explicitly told you. Thoth's timeless teachings weren't misplaced or forgotten through the natural course of history. They were deliberately interred, not by the gentle passage of time, but by institutions that tremble at the transformative power they hold. For thousands of years, knowledge capable of awakening your innate, authentic nature has been methodically concealed, discredited, or insidiously repackaged into hollow, impotent fragments. This was never a simple matter of historical oversight or unfortunate circumstance. It was a carefully executed strategic operation designed to keep humanity bound to the tangible, the easily measurable, and the inherently controllable. Because if people genuinely understood the profound depth of what Thoth so eloquently taught, they wouldn't just politely ask different questions. They would actively and decisively begin constructing a radically different reality. This knowledge posed an existential threat to established power structures, not merely in the realm of political power, but more fundamentally, the power over perception itself. The kind of insidious control that keeps empires standing tall, keeps religions wielding influence, and keeps systemic norms unquestioned and unchallenged. When you unequivocally realize that consciousness is the very architect of form, when you intimately understand that thought possesses the power to shape the passage of time, and that your mind can demonstrably alter the fundamental structure of matter, the very notion of unquestioned authority begins to crumble and erode. No ruler, no system, no dogma, no matter how deeply entrenched, can maintain its precarious hold on ground where every individual stands as a sovereign architect of their own lived reality. That's why Thoth's blueprint was painstakingly encoded in intricate symbols, evocative metaphors, precise geometry, and perplexing riddles, because it had to be preserved for future generations, but not so overtly that it could be easily located and destroyed by those who sought to maintain control. His wisdom wasn't simply stolen and misappropriated. It was deliberately and maliciously inverted, twisting its inherent goodness into a tool for manipulation. The very societies that publicly condemned esoteric teachings as dangerous heresy were often the ones leveraging them discreetly behind closed doors. Secret orders, select royal bloodlines, privileged priesthoods, many built their inner sanctum rituals directly upon core Hermetic truths, while simultaneously feeding the masses carefully curated superstition and fear. They cunningly utilized the sacred for purposes of control and domination, while simultaneously convincing the vast majority of the world that it was inherently profane and forbidden. Over time, these revolutionary teachings were systematically watered down, thickly coated in layers of impenetrable mysticism, or dismissed entirely as fanciful works of fiction. The Emerald Tablets, once revered as a source of profound wisdom, became relegated to the realm of legend. The immutable law of mentalism was reduced to a simplistic metaphor, and the sacred geometry of consciousness was relegated to the footnotes of obscure academic papers, or dismissed as occult fringe material. And that is precisely how the manipulative system intended it to be. Today, when you search for Thoth, you are overwhelmingly met with fragmented myths, simplistic cartoons, and surface-level, often ineffectual spirituality. But if you dare to delve deeper, past the constant barrage of distracting noise, you begin to discern the faint outlines of something far more profoundly advanced. A comprehensive system of understanding the very nature of reality itself, a system that doesn't passively beg for blind belief. It actively demands rigorous exploration and experiential verification. His ancient writings weren't presented as rigid religious doctrine. They were meticulously crafted quantum blueprints cleverly concealed in plain sight. When Thoth spoke reverently of the All, he wasn't describing a celestial god to be worshipped. He was precisely describing a pervasive, interconnected frequency field. When he spoke poetically of the planes, he wasn't merely being artistically expressive. He was accurately describing tangible, energetic dimensions. These weren't just stories. They were detailed instructions waiting to be deciphered and implemented. But here's the crucial element that most people unfortunately miss. This powerful system was never ultimately intended to remain shrouded in secrecy forever. It was meticulously designed to be unveiled precisely at the moment humanity reached a critical point of collective readiness. That pivotal moment is demonstrably now. Why else do you think you are here right now, listening intently to this message? Experiencing the uncanny sensation that you are remembering something fundamentally significant that you've never been formally taught. Some of what we've uncovered is simply too sensitive and potentially disruptive to be shared openly in this format. To delve deeper, I encourage you to sign up for the Free Insights Academy newsletter via the link below to access hidden knowledge that we cannot legally or responsibly share on platforms such as YouTube, including your complimentary digital copy of the Kabbalion for a limited time. The foundational teachings invariably begin with the mind, not the physical brain. The mind is paramount. Thoth's cornerstone principle that all is mind isn't a simplistic metaphor. It's a direct, unequivocal statement of verifiable fact. Reality, at its core, is fundamentally mental. Everything you see, everything you touch, everything you feel, and everything you believe exists within a vast, interconnected field of conscious awareness, and your individual perception acts as the selective lens that shapes and ultimately defines it. You've been systematically taught to believe that you exist within a purely physical universe where your thoughts are private, insignificant noise contained solely within the confines of your skull. But Thoth boldly taught the exact opposite. That thought is the primary architect of lived experience. That frequency is the underlying blueprint. That emotion serves as the potent fuel, and that unwavering belief is the unlocking key. This is precisely why the controlling system had to keep you perpetually distracted. Every mechanism carefully constructed around you, from the often flawed education system to the pervasive influence of entertainment, to the manipulative dogma of religion, and even the subtle nuances of language itself, is strategically designed to disconnect you from your inherent God-given power to consciously shape your reality. You are relentlessly told to focus on what is ostensibly real, what is deemed scientifically verifiable, what is considered conventionally logical but only by definitions and parameters that they themselves have conveniently approved and rigidly defined. And yet the very science they so reverently uphold is now rapidly catching up to the profound wisdom that Thoth understood and articulated thousands of years ago. Quantum physics is empirically proving what ancient mystics intuitively grasped. That observation inherently alters the outcome. That focused intention demonstrably shifts matter. That time is demonstrably not linear. And that fundamental energy intelligently responds to conscious awareness. Thoth's teachings weren't primitive, superstitious beliefs. They were remarkably advanced technologies of the very soul. His timeless truths pose a profound threat to the entire infrastructure of modern thought because they make one thing inescapably clear: that you are not a mere servant of the system. You are, in fact, a system unto yourself. And once you consciously remember how to effectively access and operate it, everything irrevocably changes. The universe, contrary to popular belief, is not fundamentally constructed of inert matter. It is fundamentally constructed of mind. That's not just esoteric philosophy, that's verifiable physics. And it's precisely what Thoth was meticulously teaching long before modern science reluctantly began to catch up. He didn't waste precious time explaining gods with all too human emotions or spinning elaborate myths to keep people passively obedient. He gave precise instructions, pure, functional, esoteric technologies cleverly disguised as spiritual ideas, meticulously designed for those courageous enough and ready to see beyond the alluring surface. When Thoth unequivocally stated that all is mind, he wasn't merely offering a subjective opinion. He was laying out the fundamental foundation of how reality demonstrably operates. Thought is the very substance behind all ostensibly solid substance. The world you personally experience isn't randomly happening to you. It's being actively filtered, consciously shaped, and ultimately reflected by your unique state of consciousness. And the precise moment you grasp that profound understanding, you cease living as a helpless victim of random circumstance and begin actively operating as a conscious, empowered participant in the very act of creation itself. This is where it inevitably gets uncomfortable for some, because it unequivocally places the ultimate responsibility squarely back in your own hands. If your thoughts, your frequency, and your emotional state are demonstrably crafting your reality, then the apparent chaos in your life isn't random or arbitrary, it's intelligently reactive. Not always directly your fault, of course, but invariably a telling reflection of your internal state. Thoth termed this critical process alignment. He powerfully taught that when your thoughts, your emotions, and your actions operate harmoniously in accordance with the immutable laws of the universe, reality demonstrably bends with you rather than stubbornly against you. And that is not manifestation in the diluted, wish-upon-a-star sense. It is practical mechanics rooted in fundamental physics. Consciousness is ultimately causal. Everything else is merely consequential effect. He also meticulously broke down precisely how vibration serves as the underlying architecture behind all observable form. What you perceive as solid objects are simply specific frequencies slowed down to the point of visibility. You don't consciously perceive the underlying field itself, you only see the frozen frame of its dynamic potential. But underneath every individual person, every seemingly solid object, and every nuanced emotion lies an intricate vibrational code. Intentionally shift that underlying code and the manifest form demonstrably changes. This is precisely why rituals, carefully crafted sound, meaningful symbols, and even focused intention are not primitive superstitions. They are powerful, tangible tools for real, verifiable work. The ancients were far from primitive. They simply communicated in a symbolic language because truth that is this demonstrably powerful cannot be irresponsibly handed to just anyone. It has to be carefully activated within the individual who is ready to wield its power responsibly. Modern science cautiously terms it quantum field theory. Thoth eloquently termed it the great mental plane. But the underlying concept is precisely the same. The all-pervading field intelligently responds to consciousness. And when you begin consciously working with that fundamental truth with deliberate intention, tangible things begin to demonstrably move, first internally, then inevitably externally. Reality ceases to be static and predetermined. Meaningful synchronicities accelerate exponentially. Recognizable patterns demonstrably shift. The magic you once either laughed at dismissively or feared with unwarranted trepidation begins to reveal itself as fundamental law in potent motion. You don't ultimately need unwavering belief, you primarily need congruent alignment. Thoth's transformative teachings go far deeper than simply creating your individual reality. They definitively show you precisely how to do so cleanly, with conscious intent, without the obscuring influence of ego, without resorting to manipulative tactics, and without short-circuiting your own profound evolution, because just like the intricate workings of nature itself, consciousness is ultimately governed by immutable laws. He taught with unwavering certainty that the same foundational principles that govern the movements of the planets themselves also seamlessly govern the intricate workings of your own mind: polarity, demonstrable rhythm, inherent correspondence, and irrefutable cause and effect. These aren't merely abstract intellectual ideas. They are the very operating systems upon which reality itself is demonstrably built. When you are experientially out of sync with these immutable laws, your life inevitably feels unstable, reactively charged, and needlessly confusing. When you deliberately align yourself with them in conscious harmony, the external world seamlessly becomes a mirror that actively works with you instead of stubbornly against you. And that is precisely why most people never truly experience their innate power. They desperately attempt to control the external environment without ever dedicating the necessary time and effort to mastering the internal one. They often utilize superficial rituals like fleeting spells, hollow affirmations, and creatively designed intention boards without truly understanding the foundational principles that underlie their true efficacy. Thoth powerfully taught that raw power without the necessary wisdom is inevitably destructive. That is precisely why true esoteric knowledge was always strategically hidden behind carefully crafted initiations. It wasn't ultimately about deliberate secrecy. It was fundamentally about cultivating profound responsibility. If you can demonstrably shift reality by consciously shifting your mind, then the inherent quality of your thoughts unequivocally becomes your most sacred duty. You've been carefully trained to think that spirituality is inherently separate from objective science and that consciousness is merely a fleeting byproduct of complex brain chemistry. But Thoth unequivocally showed that consciousness is definitively primary and fundamental, that everything ostensibly physical demonstrably emerges from the mental, not the other way around. This decisively flips the entirety of the dominant materialist worldview upside down. It also fundamentally means that your individual evolution is not ultimately limited by what you superficially see, but by how profoundly you choose to think. Every self-limiting belief you passively accept ultimately becomes an ingrained part of your pervasive field. Every empowering belief you actively challenge decisively weakens the illusion of limitation. The timeless teachings of Thoth were never about passively worshiping deities or superficially escaping the world. They were fundamentally about consciously taking your rightful place within it as a deliberate co-creator. Not as a self-aggrandizing God above others, but as a conscious participant in the greater intelligence that inherently animates all things, a singular drop of the all with the innate capacity to consciously remember itself. That is precisely what they never wanted you to consciously know. That is precisely what the persistent noise of modern life is deliberately designed to drown out and obscure. But now, the powerful signal is demonstrably coming through again, and this time, undeniably, you're demonstrably ready to consciously hear it and tangibly embody its transformative potential. You've been deliberately taught that time moves rigidly in a straight line from the distant past to the fleeting present and into the uncertain future, that you are inevitably born, you demonstrably age, and then you ultimately die on a fixed direction, one predetermined path with absolutely no going back. That was undeniably the first and perhaps most insidious lie. Thoth didn't simply passively reject this limiting concept, he decisively dismantled it in its entirety. He definitively taught that time is fundamentally not linear, but demonstrably spiral. It loops, folds elegantly, continuously expands, and perceptibly contracts depending directly on your individual state of consciousness. The past isn't definitively gone. The future isn't passively waiting. They are both demonstrably happening right now, simultaneously. This isn't merely a poetic metaphor, it's fundamentally literal instruction. You are demonstrably not walking passively through time. Time itself is demonstrably unfolding intricately through you. This is one of the most radically transformative teachings contained within the Venerable Emerald Tablets, and also one of the most strategically suppressed, because if time is fundamentally not fixed, then your so-called fate isn't either. If you can consciously access other seemingly disparate points in time, you are no longer rigidly bound by the scripted version of life that the controlling system has meticulously designed for you. You're fundamentally not a passive bystander. You're an active navigator charting your own course. Thoth meticulously mapped this profound concept through carefully chosen symbols, significant numbers, and precise geometry. The ubiquitous spiral, the elegant infinity loop, the symbolic Ouroboros. These weren't mere decorations. They were meticulously crafted codes, tangible markers of how fundamental energy and conscious awareness move seamlessly through seemingly disparate dimensions. When Thoth profoundly stated, "Man is a flame bound to a mountain," he was succinctly speaking of the inherent potential of consciousness trapped within the confines of dense matter, seemingly confined to a singular timeline, until it consciously remembers that it intrinsically possesses the inherent capacity to tangibly move beyond its perceived limitations. And when it does, everything demonstrably changes. The specific events you previously thought definitively defined you begin to consciously unravel. You consciously start to perceive profound patterns, echoes of past choices looping dynamically into present moments. Déjà vu, vivid dreams, heightened intuition, and sudden emotional shifts, these aren't merely random glitches in a predetermined matrix. They are demonstrably bleed-throughs, intentional pockets in the spiral where time purposefully collapses, and the illusion of linear progression demonstrably breaks down. Most people regrettably ignore them entirely, but the initiated consciously utilize them. According to Thoth, those who consciously awaken to the intrinsically spiral nature of time possess the remarkable capacity to move through it with deliberate intention, not by passively hopping into a purely theoretical time machine, but by consciously tuning their underlying frequency. Memory isn't solely contained within the confines of the brain. It's intricately woven into the fabric of the all-pervading field. And the future is fundamentally not merely somewhere you passively arrive at. It's something you consciously broadcast. When you consciously align your thoughts, your emotions, and your inherent energy with a specific version of the future you actively desire, you demonstrably begin to collapse seemingly disparate probabilities. The all-pervading field intelligently responds. Meaningful synchronicities accelerate dramatically, and the prevailing timeline demonstrably shifts. This isn't fantastical speculation. This is a forgotten science waiting to be rediscovered and consciously implemented. Indigenous cultures, insightful mystics, and cutting-edge quantum physicists have all touched upon it in nuanced ways, but Thoth was demonstrably one of the very first to teach it systematically and comprehensively. He eloquently described how certain elevated states of meditation and deeply intentional ritual can effectively dissolve the pervasive illusion of time entirely, allowing the practitioner to consciously receive profound knowledge, tangible healing, and even radical transformation from other seemingly disparate points along the unfolding spiral. What you conventionally think of as a past life isn't merely something that superficially happened before, it's something demonstrably happening in parallel across a different layer of the very same underlying spiral. This also fundamentally means that you are not irreversibly chained to your past. Whatever past trauma, negative programming, or limiting beliefs you think you irrevocably carry, it's demonstrably not static. It can be actively and deliberately rewritten. If you can consciously access the defining point, you can decisively alter the overall pattern. Thoth aptly termed this profound process the mastery of the cycles. Those who consciously perceive the inherent spiral can effectively step off the proverbial wheel. Karma, so-called fate, and cyclical repetition, they only effectively trap those who passively walk blindly. But once you consciously remember how time demonstrably moves, you consciously start living from a fundamentally different vantage point, not passively reacting but consciously responding, not passively waiting but consciously creating. Look attentively around you. The dominant system strategically keeps you trapped in rigid clock time for a specific reason. Annoying alarm bells, restrictive 9-to-5 structures, impending deadlines, and inflexible schedules. These are fundamentally not tools of enhanced efficiency. They are cleverly disguised tools of deliberate entrainment. Your intrinsic biology, your nuanced emotions, and even your individual thoughts have been carefully synced to artificial rhythms. And over time, you unfortunately start to erroneously believe that those externally imposed rhythms are fundamentally you. But deep within your authentic being remembers a distinctly different tempo, the inherent spiral hum, the resonant pulse of the greater all-pervading field. That's precisely why moments of profound awe, effortless flow, unconditional love, and deep creativity inevitably feel timeless, because at their very core they inherently are. Time is fundamentally not your inherent enemy. It is demonstrably your creative medium. Thoth's life-altering teachings actively invite you to consciously stop perceiving time as a restrictive cage and to consciously start utilizing it as a dynamic canvas. You are fundamentally not late. You are fundamentally not early. You are demonstrably exactly where your underlying frequency has demonstrably placed you. But that limiting frequency can shift, and with it, everything else demonstrably moves into greater alignment. You're fundamentally not here to passively walk the inherent spiral. You're fundamentally here to actively move through it with profound precision, unwavering presence, and tangible power. And the precise moment you consciously begin, time itself starts demonstrably listening. Death has been weaponized not solely in the literal sense, but more insidiously in the psychological one. From the precise moment you were cognitively old enough to intellectually understand what it definitively meant, you were deliberately taught to fear it with trepidation, to perceive it as an absolute end, a definitive wall, an infinite void, a final fleeting breath before the lights ostensibly go out forever. And that is demonstrably not by mere accident, because a person demonstrably crippled by the persistent fear of death will be much more likely to passively obey. They'll readily submit. They'll desperately cling to controlling systems, limiting beliefs, and ostensibly authoritative figures that promise safety and security, even if that so-called safety is demonstrably a pervasive lie. But Thoth didn't actively teach pervasive fear. He taught conscious remembrance. And according to his profound wisdom, death is fundamentally not the irreversible end. It's a conscious door, a transformative transition, a deliberate shift in underlying frequency, not a complete disappearance, but a radical transformation. Thoth aptly termed death the great portal, a conscious passage from one intricate plane of existence to another. In his carefully crafted writings, he meticulously described multiple distinct layers of demonstrably real existence, each progressively more subtle than the last. The ostensibly physical body is merely the outermost shell, a carefully designed vessel through which fundamental consciousness actively experiences density. When that fragile vessel inevitably breaks down, the fundamental awareness within it demonstrably doesn't vanish. It merely consciously moves on. It deftly slips into the next resonant frequency band, what he eloquently referred to as the tangible astral and etheric planes. These aren't merely fictional dimensions or ethereal dreamscapes. They are demonstrably just as tangibly real as this one. But they operate at different inherent speeds, different vibratory densities, and under different sets of governing laws. You currently don't consciously perceive them because your inherent senses are primarily tuned to the tangible material, but the soul, the authentic soul, never truly forgets. And that is the precise part the pervasive system desperately doesn't want you to realize and embody. If you fundamentally understood that your inherent consciousness consciously continues seamlessly beyond the illusion of physical death, that your authentic essence cannot ever be truly destroyed, you wouldn't be so readily manipulated and controlled. You wouldn't passively waste your precious life perpetually fearing the unknown, or reluctantly selling your valuable time for the illusion of so-called security. You would start consciously asking much bigger, more meaningful questions. You would start actively living with conscious purpose, rather than merely with passive compliance. That's precisely why death is so often deliberately wrapped in pervasive taboo and stifling silence, because if you perceived it clearly and accurately, you would consciously stop passively playing small. Thoth didn't superficially romanticize death. He profoundly respected it as an intrinsic part of the greater cycle. He taught that it's a sacred threshold, one that can be consciously crossed with heightened awareness or unconsciously crossed in a state of utter oblivion. Most people, he profoundly stated, simply drift passively through it like unconscious sleepwalkers, passively pulled by paralyzing fear or lingering regret, stubbornly tethered by unresolved attachments. But those who actively awaken in their earthly life can equally awaken consciously in death. Through deliberate preparation, consistent meditation, and conscious alignment, the immortal soul can actively carry tangible memory, undeniable clarity, and conscious intention purposefully beyond the deceptive veil. That is not merely abstract religion, that is practical navigation. This is precisely why many of his life-altering teachings actively focused on cultivating potent energetic mastery. He powerfully taught that the more intimately you actively align yourself with universal law while still embodied in the physical form, the more seamlessly fluid your inevitable transition demonstrably becomes. Death demonstrably doesn't erase your underlying frequency, it actively magnifies it. If your current life was primarily spent in pervasive fear, debilitating guilt, and debilitating attachment, those limiting frequencies will demonstrably echo forward. If it was primarily spent in unwavering presence, undeniable clarity, and conscious creation, those elevated states demonstrably carry over seamlessly, not as some form of external punishment or reward, but as a result of inherent resonance. He also warned of the very real potential of becoming consciously trapped in the in-between places where lost souls regrettably linger, unaware that they have demonstrably passed on, still desperately seeking hollow closure. still stubbornly clinging to the tangible material. These transitional realms, often referred to as shadow zones, are fundamentally not some form of hell but merely states of distortion, painful confusion demonstrably born from unprepared minds. That's precisely why conscious initiation was always vitally important, not merely to join a group or passively belong, but to become demonstrably sovereign across multiple dimensions, to consciously recognize yourself not just in the surface mirror, but in the expansive, mirrorless space inherently beyond form. Modern science tentatively tiptoes around these profound ideas with sterile clinical terms, near-death experiences, complex brain chemistry, and hypnagogic states. But many who have stood precariously on that deceptive edge return irrevocably transformed with the undeniable same truth, that consciousness demonstrably does not fundamentally die. There is conscious movement. There is radiant light. There is something definitively more. And that something is not merely random or accidental. It's undeniably intelligent. It dynamically responds to your unique conscious state, your unwavering awareness, and your focused will. Thoth undeniably knew this, and he purposefully left behind meticulously crafted maps, not literal diagrams, but carefully designed symbolic keys, potent rituals, powerful invocations, transformative visualizations, and practical methods to consciously orient the immortal soul in the expansive space demonstrably beyond. One of his most profoundly impactful messages was this: don't passively wait until the moment of your death to consciously remember who you fundamentally are. If you can demonstrably master conscious awareness here and now, you actively carry that inherent power with you consciously into the future. You simply don't have to be completely surprised or caught off guard when your fragile physical body inevitably drops. You can consciously walk through the great portal with undeniable clarity, consciously knowing the unshakable truth that was deliberately hidden from you throughout your entire life, that you are not fundamentally the physical body. You are the fundamental awareness consciously behind it. An awareness consciously aligned with enduring truth demonstrably does not fundamentally end, it simply consciously evolves. The pervasive fear of death is demonstrably one of the deepest and most insidious chains that humanity consciously wears. But once that self-imposed chain definitively breaks, something truly incredible demonstrably happens. You consciously start to truly live. Not passively cautiously, but actively consciously, not merely to passively avoid potential risk, but to consciously embody authentic truth. You consciously begin to perceive every fleeting moment as an intrinsic part of a much wider, interconnected journey, not merely a fleeting race toward the inevitable grave, but an expanding spiral of conscious experience, profound learning, and conscious remembrance. Thoth didn't merely want you to intellectually understand death. He passionately wanted you to actively prepare for it, not out of crippling dread, but out of profound reverence, because the fundamental way you demonstrably die is ultimately shaped by the precise way you actively live. And when you actively live with conscious awareness, you actively realize something fundamentally simple, profoundly impactful, and deeply dangerous to every system built upon external control. Death is demonstrably not the end. It's simply the transcendent beginning. So, to wrap it all up, remember this. You are powerful beyond measure, capable of shaping your reality, navigating time, and understanding the true nature of existence. The knowledge you need isn't hidden away, it's within you, waiting to be remembered. The path might not always be easy, but it's a journey worth taking. Now I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of this. What resonated most with you? Do you have any questions or insights to share? Leave a comment below. Let's start a conversation. And if you found this exploration of Thoth's teachings inspiring, be sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on future deep dives into ancient wisdom and the power of consciousness. Until next time, keep remembering,